So the U.S. government is supplying Russia with missiles, with HIMARS, and I mean, it's unbelievable until you understand that they have tasked Ukraine with delivering them, and that's how they're getting those missiles. Okay, so you can laugh now. All right, let's start. Okay, so America supplying HIMARS rockets to Russia is a little clickbaity, but it's pretty funny. Tell your friends, it's a pretty good joke. So we are going to cover a lot of ground today. I'm going to talk about what's going on the ground, why Elon Musk is not neutral in his what looks like a neutral proposal, while why Zelensky is not going to be working with Putin. Well, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the cringiest Russian media thing that I've ever seen. We're going to talk about one of the funniest memes that I've ever seen. And I'm also going to show you where I got something wrong and one of my viewers spotted it and corrected me. And I'm not above correction. I'm very happy to see that. So stay with me throughout and you'll get all those things. All right, let's start here with TASS. Herzan says Ukraine counteroffensive failed. Kryl Streminov, I talked about him yesterday, noted that there is information that Ukraine has already lost about 3,000 dead. Okay, Krill. What's actually happened here is that you've lost this. I mean, I talked about this yesterday. You lost all this area, and they're talking about how, no, nothing's happened. There's a fence here. They've lost 3,000 dead. Certainly, the Ukrainians have lost 3,000 dead given enough time, but I mean, that's not really what's going on. Here, this article is really interesting for two paragraphs, and I want to show you what it is. First, what is clear is that Ukraine's military has found a way of fighting that is far more deft and flexible than the Russians, who are heavily reliant on their creaking supply lines, deploying quickly to cut off, encircle, and destroy its units piece by piece. That's right. The Ukrainians are far more flexible on the ground. They are far more efficient at moving around, where the command and control just is not working for the Russians. And then there was a second line here where this guy is saying, I trained as an officer in the Soviet era, and some of the Russian officers here had the same training. They were professional, but it was their senior officers who let them down. This was a failure of Russian leadership. That's what's going on. And it's going to be continuing because it's systemic. The Ukrainians are following basically American or Western military doctrine. The Russians are following an antiquated Soviet doctrine. They were professional, but it was their senior officers who let them down. We know that they asked to withdraw, he says, confirming UK intelligence reports, but those higher up didn't care about their lives. In the end of the day, they were too busy with their illegal annexation and their celebrations. And that's partly true. Like they just didn't communicate in a timely way, and so they almost bagged a huge army in Lyman. Many of the Russians escaped, but he said this, I don't think the order ever came to withdraw. In the end, they organized themselves to flee despite invitations to surrender. So that's what's going on. So you're dealing with an army that looks so formidable, so much bigger, so much tougher, but it's really there's clay feet to this army, and so I think this article helped pull this out. Another one, Ukraine continues to liberate territory in the east and the south. There's a couple lines here. Ukrainian commanders in the south and the east are creating problems for the Russian chain of command faster than the Russians can effectively respond. That's right. I think that's what's going on. One more line, Moscow and its propagandists have been left scrambling to explain why Russian forces are retreating from areas that they annexed last week in a grandiose ceremony at the Kremlin. So that's what's going on the ground. Okay, one more article. This is Radio Free Europe. And I want to just show a little bit here. A senior U.S. military official said on October 3rd that the attacks by Ukrainian forces have forced Russia into a defensive crouch. That means that they're pulling back and they're just ready, but they're not able to really bring the attack back around and push the Ukrainians back. So the Ukrainians have keep taking this ground, and the Russians aren't able to respond effectively. Last couple of lines here. HIMARS have been used to strike bridges that Russia has used to supply its troops, and the additional 4 HIMARS, there's a new package with 4 more HIMARS expected to be announced October 4th. The decision marks the first time that the United States has sent more HIMARS to Ukraine since late July, and that'll bring the total up to 20. Now, there's a package of another 18 that's going to be coming, but it's going to take months, maybe even years to get all those HIMARS in country. But that's what's going on the ground. Okay, let's shift gears. Now it's time for fun with Russian state media, and I'm going to intersperse some of this with some other articles, but you'll get the idea. So we're going to start with this with Elon Musk proposes Ukraine peace plan, and there's a reason why the Russians love this. Now, according to RT, Musk posted an outline of his plan on Twitter on Monday, suggesting that Russia redo the elections of annexed regions under the UN supervision, so it would be a legit vote. But of course, between the time that he says this and the time that it would happen, Russia would be stacking the deck, flooding the country with Russians. I don't think it would win, but let's say it did, with Moscow withdrawing from these areas if voters choose. So it would actually be a legitimate election. The billionaire then suggested that Ukraine commit to neutrality. Okay, now why wouldn't this be a good idea? So it's essentially a Ukraine either gets its own land back or it loses land. Russia either gets nothing extra or it gains land. So the deck is stacked if you do that. Why not say if Ukraine gets its land back in this, then Russia loses the equivalent amount of land that it just stole. Then Russia wouldn't be so hot about this. Like if you said like all that other region between Georgia and Ukraine, the equivalent amount will go to Ukraine. They wouldn't want that at all because they're not losing anything in this process. I think if you have this idea that you can do that, I think Georgia would want its land back, and there are other places within Russia that would like to have their votes to leave Russia as well. So I think you got to be fair. If you're going to have a vote here, have a vote there, or say no, we're not going to allow people to have votes to leave their territorial borders. And either way is a fair policy, but just this is not exactly fair. Kremlin about Elon Musk's ideas on Ukraine, they deserve attention. Well, of course they think they deserve attention given what I just said. Okay, Zelenskyy endorses the NSDC decision on strengthening Ukraine's defense. It's the impossibilities of talking with Putin. So the long and short is he's not going to play nice with Putin because Putin has proved that he will not actually be an honest negotiator. And so Pravda shows that Zelenskyy officially refuses to negotiate with Putin. Now here's the actual document, the decree of the president from a few days ago. Let me scroll down to it. The National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine decided, one, to state the impossibility of conducting negotiations with the president of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin. And that's it. It's that simple. This will be settled on a battlefield because Putin has not shown himself to be someone that they can negotiate with. Kremlin reacts to Zelensky's banning of talks with Putin. To resume peace talks with Kyiv, Moscow will wait for either a change of stance by the current Ukrainian president or for a new leader, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has said. After President Zelenskyy signed a decree ruling out negotiations with Russian President Vladimir Putin, how can he be so bad, right? I mean... Russia is still ready to look for a negotiated solution to the conflict between neighbors. Of course, Russia wants to negotiate now more than ever, now that they have illegally, but legally annexed the lands. They claim to have legally done it. But it takes two parties to negotiate it, just like it takes two parties to fight. When Putin wanted to fight and Ukraine didn't want to fight, guess what? They fought. Tuesday, Zelenskyy signed the decree on Ukraine officially rejecting peace talks with Putin. One of the resolutions was stating the impossibility of conducting negotiations with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Now, here's what's interesting about RT. So that last line that I showed you, here's the RT article. Let's just look at this. On Tuesday, Zelenskyy signed a decree, and then one of the resolutions was stating the impossibility for conducting negotiations. Now, this quote is the actual quote itself, but one of the resolutions was, let's just Google that. And when we Google the stating the impossibility of the whatever, here's a Islamic newspaper essentially parrot one of the resolutions was stating the impossibility, just wholesale copying and pasting RT. And the next one of the reasons was stating the impossibility of, right? Another one, here's an Indian one. One of the reasons was, here's another one. One of the reasons was, and so it's RT is going to be, here's a Chinese one. One of the reasons was stating the impossibility. So RT knows that when they put this out, they're going to spread this throughout the world, through Islamic, Asian, African world, and that's what's going to happen. So here's just one of the examples. Here's Tasman News Agency with the same stuff. On Tuesday, Zelenskyy signed. One of the reasons was stating, so it's exactly verbatim. So, and you can go Google this yourself. Don't just believe me. Okay, go see it with your own eyes. Okay. Now RT also had this other interesting article. Like, I don't think they quite got it. RT has some, quote, good points, says Elon Musk. Elon Musk wrote in March that RT and other Russian news sources were entertaining and made some good points, according to the court documents. Musk refused to block the Russian news agency's sites from his Starlink internet service despite pressure from some governments. Now, I think those governments are wrong. I watch, I read RT, Pravda, TASS, other Russian news sources because I want to be informed about how they're thinking about it. Now, Elon Musk is just kind of he has a libertarian streak, and that's okay. He's free playing field for all. That's where he's coming from. But he also said this. Actually, I do find our news quite entertaining, Musk confided. Lots of BS, but some good points too. They even quoted lots of BS. But he said we should allow it precisely because we hate it, he wrote. That's the ping of the American Constitution. And that's right. If you're going to tolerate something, you don't tolerate something that you enjoy. You tolerate something that you find obnoxious from the other side. That's the meaning of tolerance. I say not just tolerate this, but understand the mind of the other side. That's what you should be trying to do. Okay, Pravda. Now, here yesterday, I talked about this article. The West is losing Brazil as an ally, and I said, so what? Brazil is one of the BRICS. B in BRIC is for Brazil. They're tight with Russia. It's not like they were storming the beaches in Normandy anyway. And somebody corrected me. Okay, so here, Zarastro, Zarastro, good on you for correcting me. Small correction, Brazil was actually part of the Allied powers in World War II. They were actually pretty significant, using unsung minor Allied power with the Brazilian Expeditionary Force, sending over 51,000 men to Europe. They served with distinction. And so, good on you. If I say something wrong, correct me. That's fine. I add to what I have to say. Let's have this conversation. Let's learn. Let's grow together. I'm not worried about that at all. Please give me your comments. I would appreciate if you help me. If you're correcting me, you're helping me grow, and I appreciate that. So good on you. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, Zarastro. Okay, next. Here's the Brazilian Expeditionary Force. It made me go look it up, and sure enough, that's what was going on. They were participating in the liberation of Italy. So, okay, now, here's the cringeworthiest thing that I've ever seen from Russian media. I don't know why. This is Maria Zakharova. She is the foreign ministry spokeswoman, and she posted this weird video of her, seductively eating strawberries. I don't understand what is going on in her mind where she's thinking that this is a good idea when you're occupying that particular position. But here she is, and apparently it's been around. I don't know. I don't get it. And before she does it again, I'm going to stop it because that's just creepy. Okay. And I promised you the funniest thing that I've seen as well. Some of you need to think about the security of your computers, and here's a tip for your security password. You want to upgrade from a weak one like Vladimir to a strong one like Volodymyr. Okay. Some of you will get that. Thank you for your time. I really do appreciate that you've chosen to spend this 10, 15 minutes with me. Thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.